I've gotten into the habit of prefacing who my videos are for, so I'm going to do that again. So a while ago, when Palestine first started taking over the news, one of my posts that did really, really well was the question of wondering what you would do in different points of history that a genocide or humanitarian crisis was happening, and helping people recognize that whatever they were doing right now for Palestine is what they would have done during those times. And so this video is for everybody who still thinks that there are two sides, who still thinks that this is a unique crisis, who still thinks that it's complicated or they don't know enough about the history of Palestine in order to appropriately choose a side. And I'm making this video because those people, I'm realizing those people, are not learning the history the way that we are meant to in order to prevent things from happening again. I'm realizing that there is a common misconception amongst those who are learning about genocides of our past. And I don't know if it's intentional. I don't know if it's intentionally taught this way. Could be, probably is. But the misconception that people come out of these courses or this research thinking is that speaking out against genocides of our past was an easy thing to do. That speaking out against fascism and white supremacy and oppressive regimes was somehow easier and more recognizable to be able to do this in the past than it is today. People think that it was easy for people to speak out against Nazi Germany. And again, it's because we are downplaying or ignoring or purposefully removing the role that media and propaganda has in genocide. There was censorship and propaganda and media bias, and it was illegal to boycott Nazi Germany during the Holocaust. While I, as a Palestinian, would love to believe that we are unique, it's very textbook genocide across the board. This is from the Holocaust Encyclopedia, and it talks about how Nazis used propaganda and censorship to garner support for Nazi Germany. So when I started college, I was a psych major. I was pretty sure that that was the field I wanted to go into. And then my sophomore year of college, I studied abroad, and I took a social psychology course that absolutely changed my life. And it was because of this specific lesson about a man named Edward Bernays, who is considered the father of public relations, that I decided to switch my major from general psych to journalism with a minor in social psychology, because I understood in that moment that those two education degrees go hand in hand. And it was also this lesson that resulted in me becoming completely consumed, mainly by fear, of the newly acquired knowledge I had of how unbelievably simple it was to control the human mind. And it led me to a nearly 12-year career in the public relations field. And just a note to further prove my point that media and propaganda and psychology go hand in hand. Edward Bernays used to work very closely and learned a lot from his uncle, who was Sigmund Freud. And so when you can recognize that public relations and propaganda is a manipulation tactic of the human brain, it becomes a lot easier to spot these things. And a tactic that Bernays was likely most famous for is something that he called engineering consent. And you can read his brief description about it right here, which is to control and regiment the masses according to our will, our being those in power, without their knowing about it. We are there. And there's also an additional part that's equally as important that I forgot to highlight, but it's to do so, it was necessary to appeal not to the rational part of the mind, but the unconscious. So if you're going back to public relations in the world of consumerism and capitalism, they get you to purchase products that you don't need by convincing you that you need them, that your life will be better with them. That is what they mean by appealing to the unconscious mind. This article goes on to say that Bernays couldn't have imagined that his writings on public relations would become a tool of who? The Third Reich. This man literally wrote the propaganda playbook for Nazi Germany. And because we're now all in agreement that all fascism is the same, this is now exactly the same playbook that Israel and the US are using to convince you that the genocide happening in Gaza is not only okay, but too complicated for you to want to dive into and learn about. Back to the Holocaust Encyclopedia. This is a list of bullet points that were propaganda tools that were used to spread Nazi ideas. One of the ones I highlighted was spreading negative images and ideas about Jews in magazines, films, cartoons, and other media. There are so many things that I could show you about how the media has vilified Palestinians in order to muster up support for our slaughter. However, the most recent one that comes to mind is a political cartoon that was recently taken down because enough people called them out on it being so racist and dangerous. But this was published in the Washington Post, and it is a supposed Palestinian man with children and women strapped to his body saying, "How dare Israel attack civilians," which plays into the false narrative of Palestinians using civilians as human shields, making it so that Israel has no choice but to kill these civilians, when it is actually well known and well documented that the Israeli military uses Palestinians as human shields. Here's a report from an Israeli humanitarian organization that has been tracking Israeli war crimes against Palestinians for years. And it's a report on how the military practice an official policy of using Palestinians as human shields. An official policy. They got pics and everything. Back to the Holocaust Encyclopedia, and moving on to the second thing I highlighted in this little toolkit, organizing large and celebratory Nazi party rallies. Where did we just see that? That's right, it was here, when a pro-Israel organization was outed for offering microgrants of up to $250 that paid college students to attend the pro-genocide rally that we saw in DC last week. I know this is a lot of information to be digesting at one time, but I promise if you stick with me to the end of this video, you will feel more confident to start using your voice to speak out against genocide. Here's probably the most important comparison. Starting in 1934, it was illegal to criticize the Nazi government. That meant everything from speaking out against Nazi Germany and Hitler to boycotting anything that had to do with Nazi Germany or Hitler. And something in me tells me that Americans have no idea that it is illegal in 36 of the 50 states in the United States to boycott the state of Israel. You can literally boycott America in America, but Israel is off the table. And the last thing that I will compare is the complete failure of the American media during the Holocaust and the rise of Nazi Germany and what it's doing today in the case of Palestine. And the reason why I bring this up is because people really trust legacy media. And legacy media being like the New York Times, BBC, CNN, Fox, those are all considered legacy outlets and others like them. They think they became these legacy outlets by having this reputation of always reporting the truth, when that couldn't be further from reality. And it's shown time and time again that American legacy media has repeatedly failed in times of humanitarian crises. There are a number of pieces talking about the silence of the American media or the sheer manipulation tactics that were published during the time of the Holocaust and World War II. Like entire thought pieces in their own outlets about the failures of the American press during Nazi Germany. Entire articles calling out the Times for specifically downplaying what was happening to Jews in Nazi Germany. Why? Because the owners and editors of the newspaper were so concerned that the anti-Semitism that was running rampant and still today runs rampant throughout the United States would undermine public support for the war, and that too many Americans wouldn't want their sons going overseas to fight to save the Jews. That's a direct quote. And case studies on the sheer manipulation tactics that the American press was able to use on the general American public during the Holocaust and World War II to stop people from speaking out against what was happening. And in the case of Palestine, articles like this are starting to come out, where journalists are leaving their jobs or calling out their outlets for the media bias in reporting on what is happening to Palestinians. And they are talking about the direct correlation between that media bias and the support that Israel is getting for its genocide on Gaza. And so I think my long-winded point to all of this is that if you are still one of those people who thinks that you don't know enough about this to speak out, or that it's complicated and this is a unique subject and it's not like other genocides in the past, and you think that it was easy to speak out against human atrocities back in the day, that's a lie. And so if you are someone who is comfortable in their silence or in their neutrality in times of genocide, that's not because you don't know what's going on. That's because this is who you are as a person. It does not, and it will never require higher education in geopolitics or in a specific region of the world to understand that what you are watching is not okay. And so you can do your best to convince yourself all you want that during times of the Holocaust and World War II or times of the Vietnam War or the Civil Rights Movement that you would have been a person to speak out, but you're not doing that now. I can promise you that what you are doing now is what you would have done then. And one more time to close out this video. What you are doing now for Palestine is exactly what you would have done back then.
I think maybe if it's the use of the word that's making it difficult, then maybe look at the situation without use of the word, look at what's happening and looking at the accounts of the people that are experiencing, the slaughter in this moment, looking at the children, the small bodies in the body bags, the children that have experienced loss, that are in complete shock and experiencing absolute trauma. If you don't want to call it genocide, that's okay. If the literal meaning of the word is what's making it difficult, then maybe take that part out. I think when you look at what's happening and you look at the people and you listen to those stories, I think that's where you kind of get a sense that, perhaps something is happening that's not quite right. When you look at how the people have been treated, over the last decades. I have a friend of mine whose husband came here from Palestine, and just listening to his story and his experience, I think it's important to listen to those experiences outside of what outside people are saying these people are all about, because they are human beings. And the more we focus on, this idea that they want me dead, therefore I feel that this is completely justified, we don't move out of any kind of war, any kind of conflict, unless we start to see the human beings, in the situation. And I think it's so important that we focus on that, and the human beings on all sides of it, I think, and, also looking deeper into, kind of seeing the things that you're sending. I'll look at them more clearly after, but I just think it's really important that we consider that, perhaps our governments have lied to us. Perhaps there are things that, they have manipulated in the way that they've presented it to us in order to, gain support in committing certain atrocities. And, there's so many aspects of this that all of us are complicit in, that we have all played a part in. The Palestinian people have been living under occupation for so many years, and you think of slavery, how slaves lived in those conditions for so many years. And when they rose up, when they started to fight back, the narratives were very similar. The narratives that they used to gain people to justify what happened to the Jewish people in the Holocaust. This is all propaganda and things that are used to gain support from the people, right? And it's not until hindsight that we see, the result of it. It's not until looking back that we realize that, wow, maybe I didn't look deep enough. When we continue to only listen to the vacuum of information that we already agree with, that we already believe, we're not getting the full picture. So I think it's important to listen to other voices, listen to Palestinian voices. All Palestinians are not Hamas, and Hamas didn't come out of nowhere, and this is not justifying the actions that they took on October 7th, but this is acknowledging that we can't just, we can't forget and we can't dismiss that Palestine has been experiencing war against it when it doesn't have the resources to respond for decades, right? I don't know if you can imagine living in your home and somebody just being able to come in and kick you out, and you no longer have that space anymore because it belongs to someone else now. I don't know that we could imagine, living under occupation where we don't control our water or electricity. I don't see the humanity in cutting off the food, the water for human beings. I can't see how that can be justified for anyone. I don't, for me personally, I don't care if it's people that hate me. I don't care if it's people that want something bad against me. I can still see their humanity. I can still see that they're people, and I still believe that they're worthy of living and they're worthy of being here. And, we can't just ignore the fact that some of the hatred that they might have for the Israeli government, the state, not the people, comes from the fact that they have been living under occupation, comes from the fact that, their lives have been severely limited simply because of who they are, and we talk about, them voting in Hamas. Hamas was voted in 2006, and at that time, majority of Gaza is youth. None of them would have been able to vote, so the majority of people in Gaza at this moment probably didn't vote for Hamas. And even if they did, things change after you actually live under something. Maybe in that moment it was something that they felt like they needed to do. Maybe it's something that they thought was going to be to bring hope, to bring freedom, and maybe they changed their minds after that, but I think it's important that we consider more than what we've been taught to believe, and recognize that our governments, the people in power, leaders, do have a very consistent, what's the word? That throughout history, it's very prominent that our leaders have lied to us, and they've used propaganda to influence the way that we see things, right? So it's important to question what we believe, question who is telling us what we're hearing, question our own selves, right? And this is me talking to myself as well, right? I think all of us as human beings should always question, right? When we stand too firmly in what we believe, we close ourselves off to evolving our way of thinking. But yeah.
Okay, I'm going to try and resend the message. The last one I sent, my daughter was trying to get my attention, and I wasn't sure if you'd be able to hear me. But I'm going to try and make it quick, because you had a 9-minute video audio clip, and you talked about a lot of things, so I'm going to try and touch on it. First, you talk about Palestinian children and how innocent they are, and I agree with you to some extent. Obviously, children under 17 didn't vote. Their parents did. But that doesn't mean that there are not consequences for voting for Islamic Jihad organization, okay? And the reason that they don't continue to have elections is because they're actually very anti-Western. It turns out that Sharia law and democracy, they don't mix, okay? And your Palestinian friend, ask him about that. How come all these countries with Sharia law have kicked out all their Jews? Is it because they're so peaceful? Is it because they want to coexist? Or is it because they want a world caliphate? Which one? Where did all the Jews go? North Africa, Egypt, Morocco, Libya, Ethiopia. How about places like Iraq, Iran? How about places like Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Syria? We're gone. And where did we go? Israel. That's right. That's the only place that can go. It's the only place that will take them. So you are supporting an organization that wants to wipe it off the map, from the river to the sea. Do you know what that means? Because you have these vile democratic candidates like Rashida Tlaib. It's a call for freedom. Yeah, my ass. It's a genocidal slogan. It means, and you could listen to the protesters on the streets of London or Chicago or New York or LA, anywhere really, okay? And they'll tell you that they're not in Artisan Circle, thank God, because Mr. Steven would blow them away, okay? Let me just explain something to you. If you look at the protests all over the world, the Palestinians take down the flags. They're not really Palestinian, but the Muslims, the Arabs, they take down the flag of the host country, they burn it, they spit on it, they disrespect it. The country that's been hosting them, having them in their home, letting them use their resources, letting them be in their institutions. That's how they treat the flag. When you see a pro-Israel rally, you see them walking side by side. You don't see them defacing the history or the monuments. In London, a World War I memorial was defaced. Like, what does that have to do with it? Why, in an airport of Russia, are they looking for Jews I mean, go online, listen to them. They'll tell you what they want to do to us. Okay? But the Jews are committing genocide. It's the worst genocide in history. We control the water in the desert, but yet they're all living, and they've grown their population 900%. Whew. Yeah, math doesn't math there, does it? It doesn't seem to work. So the only thing I'll agree on is that the Palestinians, like the Vietnamese, they face disproportionate horror because they've decided that terrorists, that's their best way. But there's a reality that when you have somebody tunneling underneath the earth, it makes the whole land unstable, like physically unstable. And when you have buildings that are not to code and tunnels underneath them, well, it all is going to crumble. I mean, that's just the reality. So yeah, you're going to see a lot more of those images. But the idea that somehow systemically Israel's looking to wipe off every Palestinian, it doesn't hold any truth. There's 2 million Muslims in Israel. 2 million. They serve in the police. They serve in the judiciary. They serve all types of positions. They can get health care. They can study the university level. They can run for office. What about that? What about that can be said for the Jews of Saudi Arabia? What can be said about that for the Jews of Iran? What can be said for the Jews of Libya? Where are they? Well, how come you're not upset about the ethnic cleansing of Jews? Or the apartheid treatment of Jews? Oh, there's an answer. Propaganda. You've bought into the narrative that somehow people that didn't exist until 70 years ago, somehow, with their fake flag, okay? It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And you need to ask some more questions, okay? We need to ask some more questions about why. Why are they there? Why are they there? And the answer is because they were elected there, okay? The people wanted them there. That is what they've been taught.
Hi. Sorry, I'm hoping that this will work. I think because my phone was connected to my car, maybe it wasn't working out. But yeah, most definitely, I am more than open to having a conversation. But if you're free later today, maybe I might not be free until like after 12. I'm running around on the road right now, and then I have a meeting. But yeah, I'd be free probably after 12. So anytime after that you might find a free moment, most definitely I am open to more of a live discourse than having to sit and process a lot of information that comes in at once. Yeah. Hello. So I saw the screenshot and, decided to look up, what happened. And that's the entire article, right? There's no more to it. A sound and then a speculation, right? That's the definition of propaganda, right? They put out a controversial headline to stir up people's emotions, to get them feeling angry and fearful, so that they can continue to have support of people in the atrocities that are being committed, right? You say I ignore the horror of Jews. I do not. I acknowledge them. I recognize them. I recognize the pain that's in your heart. I recognize the pain of your ancestors that you carry with you. I recognize the hatred that you receive just because of who you are. And I recognize that that is wrong, right? As a person of color who experiences similar hate from people just as a result of the color of my skin, I recognize this oppression in all places, right? I see it, I feel it, I understand it, right? The rise in hate against Jews is wrong, right? It's grotesque. It's dark. And it comes at a time when there is also a rise in Islamophobic hate crimes, right? There is hate that's rising against people, right? And it's stories like that where there's no basis of truth, just a speculation that's put out there because they know that that's all they need. A good headline to grab their attention, because not everyone is going to dig deeper and read more into it, right? I'm not sure exactly what was supposed to be proven with that post, because I'm sure you must have seen that there was nothing more to it, I do not ignore the pain of any person. My pro-Palestinian stance is not an anti-Jewish stance, right? I feel the hatred that sits in your heart. I feel the pain, and I feel all of what you carry. It's palpable. And I know and I recognize that none of that is going to help the situation. Spewing that out onto other people, using it to make baseless accusations against people that you don't know. You don't know me, and you don't know my heart. You don't know how I feel, right? And just because you can't understand where I'm coming from doesn't mean that you can tell me who I am. I know who I am. I know my heart. I know where I stand, right? I see people. I see the human beings. I recognize that we are all a function of our experiences. We are all a function of what we have gone through. Right? These tactics have been used throughout history, and the same tactics that are being used now are the same tactics that were used in order to gain consent from the people for what happened to the Jews in the Holocaust, right? That happened with the consent of people. That massacre happened with the consent of people because there were campaigns that went out to turn people against you, to make them see you as less than human so that they could justify killing you. That's what's happening now. It's the same thing that's happening. And it's important that you allow yourself to see that, to recognize that you are consenting to the taking of human life. You are playing God. You are being the judge and the jury. And you are allowing for no other ideas and no other thoughts to come through. You have blocked yourself off into your beliefs and closed yourself off from seeing from any other perspective. But yours is not the only perspective. You are not the only person that is hurting in this. You are not the only person that is feeling the frustration and the anger and the pain. There are victims on all sides. And it's important to look at history and look at how we got to where we are, because it didn't just happen overnight. There are those in power that have a vested interest in us being divided, in us hating each other, in us continuously fighting each other. Because when we're fighting each other, we don't recognize all the shit that they're doing. It's important that you allow yourself to open your eyes and release. Open your eyes and see what's really happening. Right? I'm not going to continue in the back and forth. I'm not trying to prove any point. I'm not here for that, right? You can take this with a grain of salt and continue on holding on to your hatred, holding on to that darkness. But we as a collective have a collective darkness that we have to face. And it's not all kumbaya, because healing is a painful journey. It's not something that's easy. But the only way that we move forward is by allowing ourselves to face the darkness that's within each one of us, because we all contribute to what's happening. There is blood on all of our hands. We are all accountable. And what's happening in Palestine isn't the only thing that's happening. What's happening in Israel is not the only thing that's happening. You are not the only victim. There are people around the world that are suffering. This is not all about you and what you're feeling. Yes, your feelings are important, but they're not the only ones. All right? So you can continue to hold on to your hatred and allow it to blind you from all the suffering that's happening around the world. But know that your hatred is doing absolutely nothing to help. It's doing nothing to add to the peace. And if peace is something that you truly want, try and allow yourself to find that within yourself. This cycle doesn't end with more hate. It doesn't end with more war. And if you want a different future for your kids, if you want them to see something different, because we might not see it in our lifetime, but maybe towards the end of their lives, they'll be able to see a glimpse of something different. But that different future doesn't start with hate, and it doesn't start with war. It starts when we recognize that we're not each other's enemies. It starts when we realize that we are all experiencing this life together. We are all here together, and the borders that have been put up have been placed there so that they can tear us apart. They've been placed there so that they can continue to divide us and continue to keep us arguing and fighting. But we are all people. And those borders are illusions, just so that we can define a they and an us. But there's no difference. And until we're able to see that, we're going to continue to repeat this cycle. Just for a moment, allow yourself to turn your focus within. Look within yourself and find what needs to be healed. And maybe one day you can shift your perspective and find more peace within you so that you can cultivate more peace around you.